On a quiet morning in August 1981, a father made a horrifying discovery in his daughter's home. Sylvia Quayle, a 35-year-old woman who lived alone in Cherry Hills Village, Colorado, had been brutally murdered in her bedroom. She had been shot, stabbed, strangled, and sexually assaulted by an unknown intruder who left behind a trail of blood and violence. The police launched a massive investigation, but the case soon went cold. For nearly 4 decades, Sylvia's family and friends waited for justice, while her killer remained free and anonymous. But in 2021, a breakthrough finally came, thanks to a discarded can of vanilla Coke and a new DNA technology that linked the crime to a man living in Nebraska. This is the story of how a soda can solve a 40-year-old cold case and brought closure to a grieving family. Sylvia Quayle was a caring and kind-hearted person who loved helping others and making new friends. She worked as a receptionist at a dental office and enjoyed gardening, hiking, and traveling. She lived in a spacious house on a secluded street, surrounded by trees and flowers. She had a close bond with her father, who often visited her and helped her with household chores. On the night of August 3, 1981, Sylvia went to bed as usual, unaware of the danger that lurked outside her window. Sometime after midnight, a man broke into her house through a sliding glass door and made his way to her bedroom. He shot her once in the head, then proceeded to rape and strangle her. He also stabbed her multiple times in the chest, neck, and back, leaving her body covered in wounds. The next morning, Sylvia's father came to check on her and found her lying on the floor, naked and bloody. He called 911, and the police arrived shortly after. They searched the crime scene and collected some evidence, including fingerprints, blood samples, and a rug that had foreign material on it. They also interviewed Sylvia's neighbors, co-workers, and acquaintances, but none of them had any clue about who could have killed her or why. The case was baffling and disturbing, even for the most experienced detectives. They had no suspects, no motives, no witnesses, and no leads. The only thing they knew for sure was that the killer was a violent and sadistic person who had no regard for human life. As the years passed, the case grew colder and colder, and Sylvia's family and friends lost hope of ever finding out the truth. They wondered if the killer was still out there, and if he had harmed anyone else. They also wondered if the police had forgotten about Sylvia and her unsolved murder, but the police had not given up. They kept the case open and periodically reviewed the evidence, hoping for a breakthrough. In 1995, they sent the rug to the Colorado Bureau of Investigation (CBI) for DNA testing, but the results were inconclusive. In 2000, they submitted the blood samples to the FBI's Combined DNA Index System, CODIS, but there was no match. In 2018, they contacted a company called United Data Connect, which specialized in using genetic genealogy to solve cold cases. Genetic genealogy is a technique that combines DNA analysis with online databases and family trees to identify suspects or victims. It has been used to crack some of the most notorious cold cases in history, such as the Golden State Killer and the Zodiac Killer. The company agreed to work on Sylvia's case and asked the police to send them any DNA samples they had from the crime scene. The police had one more piece of evidence that they had not tested before: a can of vanilla Coke that the killer had left behind in Sylvia's kitchen. They had preserved the can in a freezer, hoping that one day the technology would be advanced enough to extract DNA from it. They decided to give it a try and sent the can to United Data Connect. The company was able to obtain a partial DNA profile from the can and uploaded it to a public genealogy website called GEDmatch. They then searched for people who shared some of the same DNA markers as the killer and traced their family trees back to a common ancestor. They narrowed down the list of potential suspects to a few individuals and compared their physical characteristics, locations, and criminal histories to the case details. One of them stood out: David Dwayne Anderson, a 62-year-old man who lived in Cozad, Nebraska. He had a history of violent crimes, including burglary, assault, and rape. He also matched the description of the killer, who was a white male, about 5 feet 10 inches tall, with brown hair and blue eyes. He had lived in Denver, Colorado in 1981 and had moved to Nebraska shortly after Sylvia's murder. The police obtained a warrant to collect Anderson's DNA and followed him to a local grocery store. They watched him buy a cherry Coke and throw away the can in a trash bin. They retrieved the can and sent it to the CBI for testing. The results confirmed what they had suspected. Anderson's DNA matched the DNA from the crime scene. He was Sylvia's killer. On February 10, 2021, the police arrested Anderson at his home and charged him with first-degree murder. He was extradited to Colorado and is currently awaiting trial. He has not entered a plea and has not made any statements about the case. Sylvia's family and friends were shocked and relieved to hear the news of the arrest. They expressed their gratitude to the police and the company for their persistence and dedication. They also expressed their sorrow and anger for the loss of Sylvia, who was taken from them too soon and too brutally. They said they hoped that Anderson would be convicted and sentenced to life in prison or even death. They said they hoped that Sylvia would finally rest in peace, knowing that her killer was caught. They said they hoped that justice would be served after 40 years of waiting. This is the story of how a soda can solve a 40-year-old cold case and brought closure to a grieving family. It is also a story of how science and technology can help solve crimes that were once considered unsolvable. It is a story of hope and justice in the face of evil and tragedy.